get started.
Amazing stuff. Hello. Well, I'm very excited for this. Thank you so much for joining us. Welcome to Marketing at Pride. Greetings from Hunt Towers in London. I am very, very excited to get into this. Today is going to be a great opportunity to discuss how not to get cancelled over this Pride season. And we want to make sure that your brands are going to be as responsible as possible in terms of representing communities and standing up for people in what is a very wild time at the moment. So this webinar is designed to offer a valuable insight in how best to engage with the LGBTQ community authentically, but more specifically around the Pride season. And we're going to be looking at how brands go wrong, opportunities to engage the community successfully, and what impact can be driven through successful engagement. So in terms of me, my name is Ben Hunte. He, him pronouns. I'm 31 years old. I'm from East London, as I said, and I'm coming to you live from my house right now. In January 2019, I became the BBC's first LGBT correspondent. And in that role, I was reporting around the world on all things to do with LGBT people. I was also the BBC's youngest correspondent and the only Black male correspondent. Then I moved on to being the BBC's West Africa correspondent during the pandemic. And I was the first Black man ever to hold the title of Africa correspondent for the BBC, which is very interesting considering the BBC's and for 100 years, and Africa's been around for a little while longer. So it's a bit of a yikes. But then I moved, and in September 2021, I moved to Vice News to be their global correspondent, where I still am. And I'm based between New York and London, reporting on all things to do with LGBT people and human rights and injustice and race and everything good. And I'm like I said, I'm very excited today to be discussing this because I've seen over the past few years how things have become so toxic and so scary for a lot of LGBT people. At the same time as the corporate side of things looking like a beautiful rainbow shining over us with rainbow cups and rainbow sandwiches and all sorts. So yeah, it's been a real interesting mix of brands doing all they can to ensure the rainbow is still there whilst the government tears down LGBT rights and freedoms. So let's get into this. We're going to be in conversation with Jamie and Dan. So Jamie is the CEO and founder of Monumental. He's an LGBT activist and has been Pride Edinburgh's volunteer marketing director for the last 7 years, growing the event by over 2,000% during that time. Love that. And Dan is the CCO of Monumental. He currently sits on the advisory board for Pride in London and previously was their commercial director, raising over £4 million through strategic brand activations. Welcome to both of you. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you so much for being here, Ben.
Cool. I'm going to kick off with Jamie. As I said, this is a very scary time for a lot of brands. I've heard from people over the past few months when I've been doing reports that some of them are feeling that this could be the last time or the last year that their brands truly integrate with Pride because they're scared about what could happen with a Trump presidency. They're scared about what's happening with politics in the UK. People are very worried at the moment. So in terms of your marketing background, where are you seeing brands go wrong when it does come to LGBT life and Pride?
Big question, of course. But as you said, there's a kind of movement at the moment of almost like brands being scared to engage with the LGBT community to get it wrong and get cancelled. And I mean, I think we've seen so many examples of that going wrong, which we'll obviously touch on later. But I think the main reason that brands go wrong is really around kind of truly connecting with the LGBT community. I mean, I remember, I won't name names yet, but I remember there was this giant coffee brand that did like a trans campaign and did it with like a very straight white agency. And it just seemed like such a missed opportunity of like, why not like truly connect with the community, you know, work with an agency, or if you can't do that, then, you know, bring in people who get it, that are in the community to kind of advise on that, to kind of communicate effectively. Yeah. I mean, I think where then they go really wrong is that they'll pick on maybe something that's kind of stereotypical of the community and think that that's authentic and they'll ride that out. I think DoorDash last year did something which was kind of edgy, and I'm not even really sure it's safe for work, but it was basically kind of tapping into like gay sex culture. And they used it as a way to develop a menu for their users. And I'm like, okay, I get where this is going, but there's just something that's like, no, not how we want to be referred to. So I think that authenticity piece is the main thing, and actually just bringing the community into the process. is the best way to do it. So I think the reverse of that, that's where brands go wrong. They do it with existing agencies. They do it without actually having any contact with the community to know, this is legit and it's relevant and it's, contextual to the time that we're in. And they just kind of run off and just stick rainbows and stuff and hope for the best. So yeah, I think authenticity, and anyone watching in my team will be like, oh, she's on authenticity again. But that is the word.
Well, we talk about authenticity, but break it down for me. What does authenticity actually mean?
Dan, do you want to take that one?
Sure. I mean, from my perspective, I'm looking at this from a Monumental standpoint, and then the history from collaborating with Pride in London. I think authenticity really means what is first of all looking at kind of the impact that you want to deliver. So going back to the first question on kind of where do brands go wrong, I don't think brands get it wrong when they don't really know what they're trying to achieve. They just know they need to be there, and they don't really think about kind of the end game. So when it comes to authenticity, it's really about really educating themselves and understanding what are the stories behind the messages that they are trying to put out as part of their Pride narrative. And I think that really comes down to obviously working with agencies or organizations that have access to those individuals or those stories or that data, to make sure that when they come up with their approach, it is rooted in real people, real stories, real people's lives, and the impact that activism or a lack of activism has had on their lived experiences, so that they can really approach it then from an honest and true point of view. And I think the second piece then, once you've got the kind of the ideation of that campaign or that creative and where it comes from, is then really understanding how can they leverage their platforms to give their kind of their audience and that option of breadth and reach, etc., over to individuals who perhaps can tell their stories better than they can. They can provide the resources, they can provide the audiences, but ultimately let LGBT plus people be at the heart of that, so that it comes from lived experiences, because people engage with people and people want to listen to other people's stories. So whether you're looking at it from because it's the right thing to do, and it is, point of view, or whether it's from how do we position ourselves as an authentic kind of brand ally to this community, people are going to engage with that brand better if they've got real people stories at the heart of those, in my opinion. So I think that's the second piece, and then I think the third piece is around how do you support a community in a different way? How are you going to provide charitable contributions? How are you going to commit on a kind of longer term, ongoing basis? Yes, at the peak of Pride season, but also throughout the year, to really show up for the community on an ongoing basis. So I think, in summary, it's creative ideation and putting and research and education before you get started. The second piece is around giving over the luxury of your brand platforms to communities. And the third piece is then around how do you continue that contribution after you've shown up during Pride season to show real authenticity.
But I guess one of the biggest questions for this is like, but why? Why should they? I mean, obviously for me, from a human rights perspective, it makes sense because I'm seeing how rights are being eroded. I'm seeing how people are scared for their lives. But why should brands actually get involved? What's the point?
Well, I think there's loads of reasons, and to kind of tag on to Dan's more eloquent version of my initial answer, I think, brands have a platform, and yes, the opportunity is to engage with the community. And I think if we kind of tie it back to authenticity as well, it's also around that, using that platform to kind of educate and inform. And I think, silly example, but there was a kind of supermarket chain that last year did an activation for Pride and used Disney characters, but they used a lot of Disney characters, but didn't use Ursula from The Little Mermaid. That's actually based on Divine, this kind of famous drag queen. So, that would have been like the perfect opportunity to use that platform, use that activation to actually educate a wider community on something that is quite embedded in our, I guess, history and culture. So that's one of the things that can be achieved is through kind of, education of the wider community, not just targeting the LGBT community. But then from LGBT specific community, we are a very desirable demographic to be engaging with. You know,
we got coins. Yeah,
we do. The pink pound goes far. So I think that's the real opportunity, and I think, you know, like, we've got stats for days at Monumental to kind of prove the power of that community. But also, like, it's a community that's often not engaged with authentically and effectively, and as Dan says, more than, you know, we're gay more than June, so why does that only happen then? So I think that's the kind of the real opportunity, is tapping into that, you know, pink pound all year round in a community that's often underrepresented. So, you know, feeling represented and being seen is a great driver for us to engage with a brand all year round, and give our loyalty and commitment. And I think, you know, we probably all have examples of where, you know, we've seen a piece of very good advertising and then since have been quite loyal to the brand. I mean, from my point of view, we actually, at Monumental, the first year we banked with a different bank. And then I saw a Lloyd's ad in like 2018 in the Tube in London. And it was like a same-sex couple on this ad in the Tube. And I thought that was pretty out there because, you know, this was before it was the biggest trend in the world to put rainbows on everything. And it was outside of Pride season. And since Monumental has banked with Lloyd's. So I think there are so many of these examples where, when it's done authentically and maybe in some ways as well, it doesn't, you know, subtly, it can generate that like commitment and loyalty to the brand and acquire us as consumers.
Love that. While talking about engagement, I'm looking at the Q&A box, and I'd love this to be as engaged and as interactive as possible. So I'm going to jump into the Q&A box. We do have some questions coming in. Please do submit your questions. So Helen says, I'm not sure if it's a statement or question, authenticity is also walking the walk, not just talking the talk, standing up for the LGBTQ plus people who are targeted as a result of being part of their campaign, and recognizing that LGBTQ plus people will have non-traditional backgrounds that some might consider controversial. Brands need to have a plan in place to respond to such actions. This is a very interesting point. It's something that I realized when I was at the BBC. I did a piece for the news at 1 o'clock on BBC News, and I think it was about HIV. It was something good had happened with regards to like PrEP or some kind of treatment, and people wrote in and they said that they don't mind having a correspondent that's talking about LGBT things, but why does it always need to be about sex? Why does he have to keep going on about sex? And if you look at the basis of being LGBT, it's kind of based around sex. Like, there's not really, like, the underlying classification of being LGBT is usually like sex, gender, but if we talk about gay things, it's sex. So when you are looking back into people's past, if you are having people on your platforms, do you think there's anything that these brands can do to navigate the fact that, yeah, there might be some interesting things that come up from people's past. There might be interesting things that people have said about sex, that people have done regarding sex or whatever else, that literally is part of them being LGBT.
I mean, I think it's almost tying back to Dan's initial answer as well, of like, what does the brand actually stand for? You know, what does supporting LGBT people mean to them? And that's something that we always start with clients that we work with that kind of want to engage more successfully with that community. It's like, you know, great, we want to be LGBT friendly, but what does that mean? So is it about, you know, we did a piece with a B2B company around, actually your thing is around accessibility of young people into this industry. When we look at it from a hospitality point of view, it's around inclusivity of same-sex couples. So it's around kind of being really specific about what it means to you as a brand to support the LGBT community, because you can't do everything and kind of have everything going at the same time. You have to have that, I guess we call it almost like the foundation statement of this is what it means to us to support the community. And I think, you know, an example of where that went really, really wrong, which probably everyone knows about, is the Budweiser piece with Dylan. They had no clue what they were doing for the LGBT community, how they wanted to engage with them. And I think that's kind of the basis of why they got as much of a backlash and crash, really. And it actually ended in the CMO being fired because of it. But I think that is just a perfect example of like what does it mean to them? You know, was it a case for them of actually, you know, supporting trans people, or, you know, supporting, you know, minority create, like what was the thing? And they just never had it, which means they never had a response to all the backlash, which then just continued the backlash. So to tie back to what you said at the beginning, how to avoid being cancelled, that's step one. Like, know what you're there for, and how you support. And then that can then tie off into like, okay, because our thing is around LGBT youth and accessibility or whatever it might be, you can then partner yourself with, you know, charities and community groups and, you know, whatever it might be that ties into that kind of core foundation mission statement, whatever you want to call it. That's my take on it.
And I think to add to that, I think part of the problem is that a lot of brands feel like their pride campaigns and narratives need to be product specific. So it's how are we making our pot of Vaseline, for example, rainbow branded, but like, and what is our narrative around that? That's where Unilever got it totally wrong, because they charged £1 for an extra pot of Vaseline because there was a rainbow sticker on it. You know, it's just ridiculous. There's just absolutely no thought into it whatsoever. But then when you look at kind of how brands have really leveraged creators in an authentic way, I mean, MAC Cosmetics is one that's brilliant. They're consistently brilliant. And they did a campaign, I think it was last year, with queer creators and bloggers that were really into gaming. And the focus there was really around how they're sort of talking about the impact of harassment online.
Yeah.
As queer gamers, and then they're kind of using MAC Cosmetics there. But the focus there was highlighting the issues faced by the community. The product was, you know, they were wearing the product, but the drive there and the kind of the execution was focused around supporting Viva Line, you know, HIV awareness charity, and they contributed hundreds of millions over X amount of years to help support that. So there is, yes, their products were included, but it's not about branding the products. It's about people's experience of leveraging creators in a way that's not sort of really high level. It's been really well thought through, and there's a message throughout, and there's a key end goal, which is supporting a charity. It's not about putting a rainbow sticker on a product that you're selling.
Yes. On the topic of when things do go wrong as well, tying back to the first, do you think there is a need to have kind of a get out plan in place when you are launching a pride campaign now? Are we in such a toxic time that you can't, even the smallest of brands can't just put out a rainbow flag and hope for the best, or can't just put out a tweet saying, or an X saying, trans rights are human rights, and just expect for the best? Does everyone need to now have a plan in place for if they do get a backlash?
I'm going to sound like a broken record, but I think for me, it's really around that kind of foundation statement piece of what you align yourself with. And then, of course, like with any marketing campaign, you have to, you know, think, how could this maybe be misinterpreted or mistaken for something, and prepare, you know, statements and bits that can go out alongside it. But if you have that kind of strong foundation statement, that's what it kind of ties back to, of like, you know, we're doing this to support our mission of LGBT youth inclusivity or accessibility or whatever it might be. So I think that kind of offers that kind of strong backbone to kind of fall back on if needed. Dan, sorry, I know you were about to answer.
No, I mean, I totally agree with you, but my short answer is, do brands need a get out plan? No, I don't think so. I don't think they need a really kind of crisis management plan in place in case, you know, the public don't like a tweet or don't like an Instagram post. And, you know, some brands don't have the investment or the capital to be able to do an enormous out of home campaign or a massive creator campaign. But you can start small. It's just about understanding what are you trying to achieve, and what are you trying to say, and why are you trying to say it. You don't have to go massive with the Nike level style budgets, which are, if no one has seen their ads for Pride season, are kind of, I would say, a best in class example of how to get it right. But if you don't have those resources, then you can just do social content. You can use kind of micro creators to help communicate what your values are. But and you can consult with You can consult with experts in that area to help you navigate language, perhaps, in that as well. But even the companies that get it absolutely right year round with a $20 million budget with a big campaign always see backlash, always, because there will always be ignorant people out there. It's just about standing by your values and knowing that actually getting it right in that way, despite the backlash, means that LGBT people will follow you, and they will continue to follow your company because you've shown up even in a small way, but you've got it right. And I sort of call it allyship for allyship.
Ooh.
And I think with that as well, it's around knowing that, as Dan said, there will be bigoted people. There will be people that will be pissed off and turned off by your brand because of doing that. And it's about, I guess, committing to it so hard that that's okay. You know, like you're committing to the fact that that's not my customer and I'm okay with that. And last year at Pride Edinburgh, we had, this is ridiculous. We had Edinburgh Zoo march in the parade.
Oh my gosh.
And oh, they're super, super LGBT friendly. Like they do LGBT weddings at the zoo. They've got a gay penguin couple. Like it's all going on at the zoo.
That's so cute.
But they had so much backlash for taking part in Pride. And they absolutely owned it. They were just like, yeah, that's cool. Like, don't come to the zoo. You know, like that was their take of like, we are committed to this community hardcore. And we're okay with the fact that like there will be people that don't like that, but that's fine. Like we're committed to the cause. We've got our kind of statement and we've got our alignment. So yeah.
I like that. I guess this is why aligning with an organization such as yourselves will actually be useful for some of these teams, because I've had the crisis calls where people have called on me, an impartial journalist, when things have suddenly gone wrong. And I've just been like, look, I can help you to a certain regard. I can give you the insight into why this has happened. I can obviously tell you what's going on social media, but all of like the pre-thought about what you should have been doing and all of that, it's like, it's a bit late. It's a bit late.
Mm-hmm.
It comes to, by the time you're coming to me to do a report on the fact that your website is now at risk because so many people have gone onto it as a result of going viral, your hotlines or your customer care lines are being slammed because people are so angry at the fact that you've included like a trans woman in your campaign, it's almost too late. So is there an advantage to being alongside someone like Monumental where you do kind of have this planning conversation ahead of it?
Well, I mean, my answer will be kind of very simple. I'll let Dan do the proper commercial answer. But I think from my point of view, like ours is authentic diversity in thinking because our team reflects that. You're not coming to a very traditional agency trying to get them to do something that is seen as like out there. Like we probably have to tone down most of the stuff we do, but that's just because we're so hardcore in the community. We're aligned with Pride, we're aligned with minority charity groups that work in all different types of groups and organizations. So it's natural and normal for us to be working and speaking to minority communities every day. So I think that's really the unique advantage, is that we're not going to have to go and test campaigns to see if it lands in that community, because we are the community.
Yeah, totally. And to give the slightly more commercial answer, as you put it, I think if we're talking about culture there, what we also have then is that kind of is the data insights on if we've got access to these audiences and we know how to speak to them and kind of what they want to see and kind of why they want to see it, we can help brands then educate internally almost on, well, what does this mean for us from a customer acquisition point of view, from a commercial returns point of view, from a growth point of view? Because, you know, whichever campaign you put out there, whether it's something around, the Christmas holidays, whether it's something around Ramadan and Eid, whether it's whatever it is, and you're doing a campaign about it, somebody in your business is going to be measuring the success of that. And there'll be, whatever that metric is, there'll be measurements of success in there. So we can help give that data on, well, actually, don't do a massive out-of-home campaign. If we really want to drive the customer conversation, leverage micro creators on TikTok and then leverage up to macros on Instagram, for example. And here's the data to show you how, specifically with diverse audiences and then LGBT audiences within that, why that is A, a better spend of your investment, B, is going to drive greater greater kind of social share of voice conversation, and see give you a better ROI. So that story then becomes internally not just about how do we show up for Pride and which channels do we use, but it's why are we not doing this as part of our strategic growth plan every year?
Yes.
And I think to add to that, sorry, Ben, just one
Go
quick
on.
thing. Just one example of a campaign, I guess, of where we have kind of chopped and changed and adjusted to do this is we're currently working with a large leisure brand, and we're doing a run campaign. But we noticed that actually run creators are predominantly white males. And so we actually changed up the whole campaign and the whole structure of it in order to involve, Black female runners who are just getting started and have this kind of micro community of people like them. So I think it's also that kind of eye on the pulse finger eye on the pulse, that's a bit weird, finger on the pulse, of kind of being deep in the community and understanding like, oh, actually, here is a better opportunity. And through doing that, we're actually empowering, micro diverse creators who might not have the same opportunity as the huge white male runner. And through that, achieve what Dan's just said with that kind of higher ROI, that higher loyalty and such.
Well, that links perfectly to the next question that's in our Q&A. So someone anonymous has asked, what role do creators play in holding brands accountable for their LGBTQ marketing efforts? And how can they advocate for more inclusive and authentic representation? Now, this is quite interesting because usually if there's a pushback around Pride and around a campaign that an organization has done, it usually is an influencer that's kind of started that conversation, right? It's someone that's put out, this you? Or what are you doing? Or like whatever. So it's like, if you have these people on side as part of your campaign, I guess they are going to be holding you accountable. So what role do these creators play in a wider perspective, please?
Should I go down?
You start.
Okay. Short answer is a huge role. Obviously, I think, creators have such a responsibility to the audiences that they influence. And a lot of them have become much better at kind of sifting through that and looking for that authenticity piece of like, hold on, is this just the I want to look gay campaign for June? Like, that's not me. And I know plenty of, we've got 12,000 on our books. So we know plenty of them that kind of tell us about these stories of brands that are quite known to not be the most diverse or inclusive that have reached out to them for campaigns and they've turned it down. And I really respect that. And I think, again, kind of going back to the Dylan example. So Dylan spoke at South by Southwest a couple of weeks ago, and she mentioned something that really stuck with us, and it kind of really translates well into this context of let the community decide that you're an ally, don't do it the other way around. And I think, creators have that opportunity of like, sifting through the right brand, and then, letting them be like, yeah, this brand's cool, guys, like, check it out. And yeah, letting them be the voice, letting us as the community decide that you're the ally, not the other way around. Dan, back to you.
I couldn't have said it better myself. I'll leave it there. I'll leave it there.
Love that. Well done, Jerry. The next question in the Q&A is, how do you approach partnerships and collaborations with brands during Pride Month to ensure that your values align and that the campaigns are genuine and impactful? This is quite interesting. So it's kind of a follow-on from the previous one, but I'm seeing my inbox pop in, my DMs are popping with Pride is coming around. So please, like, sell everything. Like, what have you got that we can promote? And it's quite interesting that obviously the rest of the year exists, but at this point, this is like the heightened point for Pride campaigns. It's what's going on. But it does make one sit and pause and think about what does it mean to actually be aligned with this organization or this brand. Is there, I don't know, if we've got creators watching, is there a way for them to ensure that what they're signing up to isn't going to negatively impact them in the long run?
I mean, I think we'll flip how we started this webinar, which is around kind of doing your research and kind of educate yourself and all the rest of it from a brand point of view. I would say creators are completely within their right to say to the brand, well, show me your creds. Like, what are you all about? And that sort of thing, and sort of say, well, actually, I'm happy to come and collaborate with you, but what do you stand for, and where's the proof of that? And it may be that brands don't have enormous policies or kind of proof that they've delivered a huge amount of impact previously, because they may just be getting started. But I think it's fair to have a conversation with the team and say, well, look, what do you want me to do for you? And kind of what's the sort of main objective here then, and how is my voice, in your opinion, going to change the dial or shift the conversation, or really kind of deliver that impact that you want to see? So I think actually, as much as brands need to engage people like Monumental or whoever else it is out there on what do I need to know and what do I don't need to know, creators can do the same thing. Creators are well within their rights to quiz brands and say, well, before I go ahead and take your money, you show me why I should work with you.
And in terms of like brands though collaborating with Pride, I think it's also, you really looking into that word of collaborate. I mean, Dan will probably agree with this as well. Like, sitting on the Pride side, you do get brands that kind of force their thing into Pride, of like, oh, well, we've done this thing and like, just stick it in and we'll pay you this. And it's kind of like, well, no, that's not kind of how it works. Like, we sit at Pride to support these types of things. So even kind of working collaboratively with the charity itself to develop something that is going to be of value on the day, and in turn have a much bigger impact on your brand. I mean, an example of that, we're just developing an activation for Pride Edinburgh with a brand, and instead of doing the stick your logo here and pay us this, we're actually like, well, why don't we set up, partner with a HIV testing charity and do rapid testing on the day that can be, sponsored by you guys, but that offers real value to the community. People are going to have such a great experience of your brand because you've offered something that's really, important, valuable, and again, authentic to the LGBT experience. So I think it's about, thinking more widely about the impact that you can have at Pride and working more collaboratively with the event itself to deliver authentic experiences where your brand can have a much bigger impact on someone's life than like, oh yeah, I think I saw a logo on a screen. It's more than that.
Yeah, and I would also just say to that, I think a lot of the challenge with the execution of campaigns is always that typically what you see is that they're led by teams that are DE&I or HR led, and then kind of supported by marketing from a kind of creative drive standpoint. It's not usually the other way around when it comes to investment and energy and everything else. So there's always a concern around how do our list of 15 brand values on kind of people experience and kind of being open to everyone. How are we getting those core messages in this 10 or 15 or 30-second VT, for example? And I think the short answer is you don't be prescriptive with them. If you've done the work in the first place, you understand the voices of the people that you're trying to represent or that you're trying to support, and the impact that you want to achieve is genuine, then your brand values will disseminate through that content automatically. You don't have to prescriptively tell audiences, we stand for this and we stand for this and we stand for this, and because of this we put a rainbow sticker on this box. That's you don't have to be that prescriptive. That'll naturally flow through the creative and it will feel more authentic. So I would say, in answer to the question, don't worry about being really explicit with communicating the brand values. If you've approached it in the right way, that will happen automatically.
I wonder if there's something around whether campaigns should be positive or maybe include a dash of reality and like trauma in them, appreciating the times that we're in. I wonder if either of you had thoughts on that. Are we in such a weird space that actually putting on the rainbows and being like, yay, the community, everything's great, is actually a negative right now?
What a question. Do you know what? I mean, is this again a jail-free card? I don't know. There's space for them both, right? But I think what we need to remember is, and it's also understanding who the audience is. So Lego are brilliant at engaging with the community, and they did a campaign last year or the year before, which was upbeat. It was light. It was obviously looking at kind of there's an education of young people in there as well put on with their campaign, which is everyone is awesome, and that was really about really kind of responding to the season in that way. And there is a place for that because it really depends on the audience that you're trying to educate and kind of creating different characters in the Lego set to help kids on that journey to understand that the world is full of different people, and everyone is special, and kind of Lego kind of embodying that is a really nice way to do it. And then in a slightly different way, you have Dr. Martens, who did a campaign called Pride Generations, which was sort of documentary style short films talking about people's lived experiences and kind of some people who were there at Stonewall, with the movement sort of officially kicked off. And some of that content is traumatic. But it's really important that the challenges that marginalized and oppressed people are still facing are clearly communicated to audiences, and brands have a responsibility to do that if that's the angle that they want to take. So I think there is a space for both, and I think the reason for that is that Pride started as a protest. It's still a protest, and I'm of the personal opinion that it will continue to be a protest until everybody is equal anywhere in the world. And I think because of that, wherever you live, whether you're in a place like the UK or somewhere like Switzerland, where it's human rights and LGBT rights are kind of way up there, there always needs to be a balance between protest and continuing to fight for kind of equal rights, but also celebration of kind of the growth of where we've come up until this point. So do both, but make sure that when you've chosen your angle, you're committed to the angle.
That's interesting, actually. I think it's something that when people reach out to me asking about this, and I say, well, to be honest, maybe do the more realistic, this is where we are piece first. And then a year later, follow up with the yay, everything's great. So that when people do come to you and they're just like, what do you mean things are great? Like, what's going on? You kind of got something to back it up. So yeah, both. I like that.
As well, like just to add to that is also like it's very dependent on your channel. Like I guess these answers are almost like if we were to buy out every screen in the UK for the next 12 months with one video, what should it be? The reality though is that very, very few brands have that luxury, or are even bothered by that. So I think the stuff that we do more at Monumental is working with creators. It's around quantity as well of content, because obviously we've got social media platforms, so we can develop storylines, tap into different angles at different points in the year. And I think, when we're looking at things like creators, leaving the briefs as kind of inclusive and diverse and open-ended as possible to let the community again kind of be in charge of how that narrative is told and where it makes most sense to them to do that authentically and in line with their style and their content type will naturally create different views and different angles. Someone might take it down a sort of more realistic, this is where we've come from route, whereas someone might want to focus on a more lifestyle-y, happy-go-lucky kind of route. There is no right and wrong, but I think, from our side, anytime we do any sort of creative marketing, and I know that there's a question that kind of ties into that in the Q&A, it is about leaving that as open-ended as possible, still putting some boundaries in place from a brand point of view, but giving the creators the chance to create in a way that's authentic to them.
Love that. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, seriously, there's one more point to make on this, which is going back to the original question, Ben, around kind of whether the vibe of Pride campaigns should be joy bringing or whether they should be kind of based in kind of real personal challenges. And I think when we bring that into the kind of the monumental sphere, the best way to do that, if you've got massive budgets, frankly, or tiny budgets, is to leverage user generated content. Because UGC at its heart is about personal storytelling. So whether that's personal storytelling about an amazing coming out experience or an amazing kind of growth journey from the joy side of things, or whether it's about kind of recognizing the history where we've come from and communicating kind of personal challenges that we still face, that's where other consumers are going to engage the most. And therefore, if you're the brand that's going to platform that content, then consumers are going to engage with that far better than they would a giant out-of-home billboard.
Yes, I like that. Jumping back into the Q&A box. Someone has asked, do you have any examples of brands celebrating Pride the right way? Oh, the right way is interesting. Or any favorite campaigns? I guess, what does the right way look to you? What are your favorite ones?
I have to call this out, and I tell everyone this. It's been around for I think 2 years, 2 or 3 years, and I still find it really moving actually, and I think it's a perfect way that a brand has shown up and given their platform to an audience. And it was with Mastercard. I think it's from 2021, and it was a campaign focused on. It was called True Name, I think the name of the campaign was, and it started off with individuals talking about trans non-binary individuals talking about their journey, and also why every time they took out their credit card, it reminded them of their dead name, and they felt awful about it. And then Mastercard, it was kind of a kind of sort of short films of each person, and then Mastercard showed up and gave them a card with that was their chosen name, and they were the first banking business or card company in the world to do that. And I think it's so incredibly moving, but it's nothing really to do with Mastercard selling a product. It's about them showing up and innovating and changing how they do their business and being the first in that sector to give something authentically to a community that otherwise every day had felt really shit about themselves because they felt they saw their dead name on the card. And for me, that was masterful. I thought it was brilliant.
Masterful from Mastercard. Love that. Love it. Jamie, what are your favorite campaigns?
There's so many. I mean, this one again has been around for quite a while, and like Dan and I were actually talking about it the other day. But I love the Skittles one, of like a brand literally taking their brand away, their colors away. I think is really, it's cool because obviously it's aligned to their brand, obviously in terms of look and feel, but it's just quite it feels like quite an act of giving in a sense, and it's not kind of overproduced or anything like that. It just sort of happens every year, which I love. I mean, I think the one thing that I would want brands to get away from is, and this is a complete, well, not complete change of subject, but one thing that I do hate is, what does pride mean to you? I mean, that has been used and overused. And I feel like it's like the entry level, like we're going to do pride marketing. So anyone that basically stays away from all the stereotypical stuff, I'm a big fan of. But yeah, the Skittles one always stands out. And obviously the Lego one as well. Love it.
Yeah. I'm going to go back to the Q&A box. So Helena said, brands and marketing agencies who use minority content creators, models and personalities need to make sure that they are inclusive and responsive at every step, i.e. ensure contracts use inclusive contracts, make sure makeup artists and photographers are using inclusive language, such as correct pronouns. And it's an opportunity for brands, businesses to review every touch point in their organization that can carry through the rest of the year. That's a good point. So should these organizations, anyone that kind of partners with you, be using pride as a way to increase diversity, equity, inclusion within their organizations? Is this just something that should be done publicly and say, we love pride, but internally people are rotting with their LGBT identities and really struggling? What's going on there?
Well, I think Pride in London has kind of launched quite a good program to avoid that happening with their Pride in the City program. And I think any Pride, well, most Prides for sure, the capital ones, will do a lot of due diligence to ensure that that's not happening and it's not the case. But I think a lot of Pride activity does start with the humans that are actually at your brand. And as kind of Dan mentioned, then it may, jump into marketing a bit in terms of, how can we kind of double up on this? But I totally agree with the comments around, making it as kind of diverse and inclusive and reflective of the community as possible when the likes of creators are being briefed.
Yeah, for sure, I completely echo that. I think it is an opportunity to review how brands and businesses operate internally and how they can improve and be better. Although I do think there is a fine line between doing that and then using people as a test bed, for want of a better phrase, because you're dealing with you're dealing kind of with individuals' kind of personal stories and everything else, and you want to make sure that if you don't know necessarily how to, or if you're not quite sure that the next policy that you're going to implement or the next the next step that you take as a business is going to positively impact the team, and you get it wrong, then it's your teams that are going to feel the brunt of that. So I think yes, yes, essentially, because there's some great things you can learn from other organizations and from community groups and agencies and whoever who are activating really well during Pride season. But there's a fine line between doing that and negatively impacting the kind of people who are delivering your business and growing your business for you. So I think be considered.
Nice. We've got 10 minutes or 9 minutes left. So I wonder if we can talk more about Monumental. So tell me about some of the great things that you've done around Pride.
God, I think I might need more than 9 minutes. Well, so we've been working with Pride for years, and as kind of you said in the intro, I've been at Pride Edinburgh for 7 years. I think I tried to do it on my own for about a year, and then I started kind of getting the help of Monumental to deliver it. So everyone in the team kind of gets in on the day of Pride, which is awesome. But then in terms of client campaigns and work, I think yeah, probably my favorite to date, which is still ongoing, is the work that we do with Lululemon. Pride is important to them, but their commitment to working with us to reach and engage diverse communities authentically is all year round. And I love that. There is, with a lot of our brands, we obviously work with them all year, but then around Pride, there might be a bit of a different activation. And it's just kind of seen as that, like it's not the be all and end all, but obviously it's a moment in time that needs to be recognized. So I think that would probably be my favorite for sure is the brands that work with us all year round have that commitment, and commitment also then means spend really to work and engage with these communities. And then activate a little bit bigger around Pride, but then it ends up feeling very authentic because it's re-engaging maybe the creators you already engaged or repurposing content that you've already created. So it doesn't feel like that big a stretch. That being said, Pride can be the start of that. So if you want to use this Pride season as like, okay, this is how we kick off, and you do it again authentically and with the right partners on board, with being considerate to the community, then there's no reason why you can't start at Pride and use that as the big kickoff to then a kind of continued commitment to engage with our communities and support them, really.
Amazing. Dan, anything to add? Anything, your favorite things around Monumental and Pride inclusion?
Well, I joined the business in January, so this will be my first Pride at Monumental, which will be very exciting. But I think one thing that's always amazing to see are those brands that do take that step, that are bold. Yes, they're scared of getting it wrong, but they are bold and they take that step with trusted partners to get it right. And then they see the impact that it's having, not only on their customers and the consumers that are engaging with that from that kind of a sentiment analysis exercise that they've done, but also in terms of what it's doing for things like reputation, for its social engagement, et cetera, et cetera. And then they continue to be diverse and inclusive in that kind of diversity in their marketing communications year round. And as Jamie said, clients of Monumental have often started there and have continued working with us for years because they recognise the value of the diverse consumer and actually how much impact they can deliver to diverse audiences as well. And they really see that kind of two-way street benefiting their business year round. So I'm really excited to see how many more brands decide to do that after the end of July this year.
Amazing. And if people want to get in touch with you, what's the best way to do that?
Just head to our website. Oh, I mean, unless Dan, you're about to give out your personal number, but yeah, just head to our website. Text me. And then, you can contact us through there or reach out via LinkedIn.
Amazing stuff. Well, if you've got any final thoughts, now's the time to share them. Any final questions? But otherwise, I think that's kind of it. So thank you so much for joining me. Really, really enjoyed that. Like we said, if you do want to learn more about engaging authentically and successfully with LGBT communities, please do reach out to Jamie and to Dan. And hopefully, well, it's next month now, gosh. So if you're going to do it, then act quickly. If not, then I hope that whether it's this year or next year, your Pride campaigns are successful, your activations are amazing, and people talk about you for the right reasons. Thank you very much for joining us. See you later.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, Ben.